about to write a case study on a recent branding project I worked on. It is for the title of the name of the brand is Petunia Mind Academy. And over the years, working on brand identities, it's been clockwork for me, formal onboarding call, hear what this person has to say, send them an invoice, agree on the pricing, kickstart the project, round off, and that's it. I think one thing that has been really progressive for me is not in the delivery. I think it's in the delivery of the skill and not the skill. What I mean by that is I'm a good designer, right? And I like to think that I am a great designer. And I like to think that I am a great designer not because I can design beautifully, but because I can design what is functional because it doesn't just solve the problem, but it makes an emotional connection with the market and the owner of the brand. And so for this branding, it was really interesting, right? Looking at my sketches here and I'm seeing all the doodles I made. And I think a huge part of solving problems, design problems, has to do with empathy. And I think empathy is the first phase of the design circle, where you put yourself in the client's shoe, really try to feel their emotion, feel what they feel for their brand, feel what they feel for their business. And I like to think of branding, right? When you first meet the clients and your partners through the journey of creating that brand identity, it's like meeting a lover for the first time. And you can bore them with the fact that you're the best person for the job, you've done this a million times over, or you can care. You can focus your vision on that person, as it were, if this were a date, and really find out who they are. I know sometimes we don't really know who we are, right? Certain people ask us certain questions and we start to answer them, and we're like, when we look back, reflect on what we answered, we never really realize how much of ourselves others could bring out. So in meeting other people, we find ourselves. And I think this was so with this brand. I think her experience pretty much was she had an idea in her mind. I helped her bring it out, and she figured out her brand herself. And so when I thought about it, it's empathy. Empathy is the first phase of your design circle. And I think a lot of times people sacrifice empathy for, I know empathy is not something you do for somebody and they don't recognize it, right? Yeah, you don't do empathy and the other person doesn't know that you did empathy. Maybe how they describe it will be different. Maybe they won't call it empathy, but they'll say he really listened. And I think when you're, in business, it can be very easy to ignore the person in front of you and just see them like, one more client. But this client is a person with feelings, with emotions, with vision, with a goal. And I feel like working with Roseline, the founder of Petunia Mind Academy, was really interesting because um the saying takes two to tango. And as much as she described working with me was really amazing, I think looking back, she was an A client, or she is an A client, and she was able to bring out the best in me. And the brand was really fun to work on. The name, for instance, Petunia. I asked her, okay, tell me about this name. How did it come about? And she says it's a flower. And if you see some of the preliminary sketches I made, I was trying to iconize the letter M. And I did that successfully in a way that sort of looked like a petal, right? One part of a whole, the M. And when you put the M, arrange that M on four sides and think of a square and then put it on all four sides of the square, you get a flower. And this is a brand that's supposed to teach kids French. And when I thought deeply about that again, I was like, how do you make a brand childish? Because one has to balance the ideas of the clients and the market. Now, the person who owns this brand is an older person, but he's going to serve a younger audience. How do we make the brand childlike? And then it came to me, right? Of course, the brand's initials is PeMA, right? PeMA, Petunia Mind Academy. But what happens when we introduce a vowel sound? It becomes like a name. So we introduce the E in the name, and PeMA becomes PeMA. And so when you say the word PeMA, it sounds like a friend. It sounds like someone you can trust. And you see, branding is psychological. It is not just what you see, it is how it makes you feel. And I think on the emotional level, I had to design the brand in a way where the name could be iconic. And how do you make a name iconic? Make a word mark. But if you want it iconic, it also means that it should be able to, there should be something about it that stands out. And so I introduced an icon in the M, the letter M. And the M tells the story of someone being led by someone. And in this case, the founder, Rose, leads these students on the journey to learning French. And then she gave me a really beautiful, um, watchword. Um, Start them early, watch them soar. Start them early, watch them soar. How poetic, how very descriptive that the flower, starts as a bud and then grows beautifully. And so the learning experience for this brand will be to start them early, teaching them French. And I remember learning French when I was much older and it didn't really stick. But how about I learned it when I was way younger? And so when you start kids early, and this is a message to the market, right? When you start them early, they bloom beautifully. And you've seen scenarios where a child is able to learn multiple languages. And so for this brand, this is what we sought to do. We sought to make the brand relatable for the market, for kids. Start them early, watch them soar. And PeMA is that brand that literally holds your hand, holds the child's hands. Another thing about branding is building a mood board. And so my journey to working on this brand involved her sharing some case studies, some brands that inspired her. And of course, I did my own work and put up the presentation. And, she was able to, share her thoughts with me. And I think when you think back at the first illustration I gave of branding, is like going on a date. And on that date, you're trying to find out, if is this client right for me? Am I right for them? Can I solve their problem? Can I meet them where their need is? And Rose could confirm that for herself, that yes, I was meeting her in the middle. It was a journey, it was a partnership. And as the journey kept on winding, working on the brand identity, doing the mood boards, sharing what some concept ideas would look like, it hit me. How about we create an avatar for the brand? And so PeMA, like I said before, sounds like a person, right? Sounds like someone you want to make your friend, sounds like somebody that's someone's friend. We decided to create a character from her identity. Now, this was not in the initial brief, but I looked at the problem and I looked at the market. How do kids remember a lot of songs? How do kids learn? Avatars. People, we all use avatars. Growing up, for me, it was back in the days I used to watch Teletubbies, and then I graduated and started watching other things like Sweeney's, and I still remember the songs till today because of the characterization. And Barney and Friends, right? These avatars were easy to teach them. And look at kids' parties. You see people play dress up as different things. And what if we could give PeMA, we could bring PeMA to life? And so the biggest thing was, how do we take something as abstract as a flower and a make it an avatar? And so I shared my thoughts with her, right? These were initial thoughts. And one thing I liked working with Rose is she was very receptive. She was someone who was not scared to run with me. And even though sometimes my own ideas scared her, she was able to welcome it and see how far we could run with it. So we created the avatar PeMA, right? And PeMA is literally a stick avatar. So why I thought about this, what if kids could sketch this avatar? What if they could color on it? What if this avatar could travel to different places? What if this avatar could speak? And so hence, I created like a storyboard of different avatars, that same avatar rather. And the basic concept of the avatar is it has a really big head, but that head is a flower. And so I took it to Illustrator, gave it some, added some rendering to it. So what looked like slapstick, just flat, became sort of like 3D when you add some lights and shades to it. And PeMA was created. And I think it was a really beautiful thing because when I started the project, in my head, I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm going to design a beautiful logo for her. But I think at the end of the day, I was able to create an experience for the brand. And so there are so many layers to the branding that when you peel one from the other, you discover more. At the very, surface level is the brand's name, Petunia Mind Academy. Petunia is flower. That flower inspired making the M iconic. Now that M, put it on four sides, you get a flower. And that flower can be used to tell the story of start them early, watch them soar. Flowers is a metaphor for kids learning early and blooming. And when you also focus on that flower, you can now connect it to the name PeMA. And PeMA is an avatar. PeMA is someone who wants to hold your hand on that journey. And so the story of this branding is a story centered on empathy for the client, empathy for the market that this client is going to serve. And it's been a process of iterations where I had to listen to some of the things she said. And I think she was brave enough to share so much. I was reading through the brief and it felt like a brand Bible was already created. And this was just a questionnaire I shared with her. And you see, PeMA was birthed. And um, the brand application of the avatar created like a style a system, a brand identity system that blends both the colors, avatar, typography into a whole unit. And it's interesting to see the result of this branding. And I hope going through this, you remember at the end of the day that is branding is a way of selling an experience to someone. And sometimes it isn't just what you see, it's how you feel. Well, how do you feel when you hear the word PeMA? How do you feel when you look at her colors? You look at the identity, you look at the avatar. How does it make you feel? Do you want to go on that journey of learning? As a parent, would you want to send your child to Petunia Mind Academy? I bet you would. I bet you would. And that was the result. That was the goal we wanted to achieve. And I want to believe that 100% we hit the mark, and we even set the bar even harder. And so this brand will be entering the market and be able to differentiate from other people in the market. Her colors stand out, the identity stands out. Adding a third level of identity with the avatar is also something that will set her apart from competitors in the market. So this is basically the story behind working on the PeMA identity. And I think at the heart and the core of this partnership, it was one of empathy, design empathy.